The air inside the shipping container is thick with the smell of industrial rubber and old grease. But the most terrifying thing isn't the heat or the lack of light. It is the fact that I am not alone in here. I can hear them breathing just 6 feet away, separated from me by nothing more than a thin, plastic tarp and a few crates of heavy machinery. There are 3 of them, and from the way they whispered about cleaning up witnesses before the truck started moving, I know that if they find me, I will never see the daylight again. The semi-truck hits a pothole on the dark highway, and my entire body lurches forward, my shoulders slamming into the corrugated metal wall with a dull thud that sounds like a gunshot in the cramped space. I freeze, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I am certain they can hear the rhythm of it through the floorboards. The muffled conversation on the other side of the tarp stops instantly, replaced by a silence so heavy it feels like it's crushing my lungs. My hand flies to my mouth, pressing my palm against my lips to stifle the gasp of pain blooming in my shoulder, because I know the rules of this game. The moment I make a sound, the hunt begins. Did you hear that? A voice rasps, the sound low and gravelly, vibrating through the darkness of the hold. I hold my breath until my vision starts to swim with tiny sparks of light, my muscles locking into a rigid, painful pose as I pray the driver hits another bump to mask the sound of my own blood rushing in my ears. I am a stowaway who picked the wrong vehicle to hide in, seeking a free ride across the border, but I stepped into a rolling coffin shared with men who trade in lives. I hear the unmistakable sound of a heavy crate being pushed aside, the wood scraping against the metal floor with a screech that sets my teeth on edge. They are looking for the source of the noise, moving slowly through the darkness of the trailer while the truck hurtles down the midnight highway. I am curled into a ball behind a stack of tires, my knees pressed against my chest, trying to make myself as small as possible while the heat in the container rises to an unbearable degree. Every breath I take has to be measured, shallow, and silent, a slow expansion of the chest that I have to consciously control so the fabric of my shirt doesn't rustle against the rubber. A flashlight beam cuts through the gloom, a sharp blade of white light that dances across the ceiling of the container and flickers through the gaps in the machinery. I squeeze my eyes shut, as if being unable to see the light makes me invisible to it, while the footsteps grow louder, heavy boots thumping on the floorboards with a predatory, deliberate pace. The truck swerves suddenly, likely changing lanes on a deserted stretch of road, and I feel a loose bolt roll across the floor near my feet. It clicks against the metal, a tiny sound, but in this forced silence, it feels like a siren wailing my location to the men with the flashlights. "I know someone's back here," the gravel-voiced man says, his tone almost conversational, which somehow makes it much more terrifying than if he were shouting. I can hear him pulling back the edge of the tarp, the plastic crinkling with a sharp, snapping sound that makes my skin crawl with goosebumps. He is searching the crates one by one, moving closer to the back where the tires are stacked, and I realize I have no exit, no weapon, and no way to signal for help without alerting my executioners. I wonder if the driver knows what is happening in the back of his rig, or if he is just a man doing a job, blissfully unaware of the cat-and-mouse game being played inches behind his seat. The light passes over the stack of tires, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air just inches from my face. I bury my face in my sleeves, trying to filter the smell of old oil so I don't sneeze, my throat itching with a sudden, desperate urge to cough that I have to fight with every ounce of my willpower. The tension is a physical weight, a tightening coil in my gut that makes me want to scream just to end the anticipation. But I know that silence is the only thing keeping the blood inside my veins. I hear the man mutter a curse word, his footsteps retreating slightly, but I don't relax because I know he hasn't given up. He is just changing his angle of approach. Suddenly, the truck begins to slow down, the whine of the engine dropping in pitch as the driver shifts gears, and I feel the tilt of the trailer as we pull off onto a gravel shoulder. My heart drops into my stomach because a stationary truck means there is no road noise to hide me, no vibration to mask the sound of my movement if I try to shift my weight. The air breaks us loudly, a long mechanical sigh that signals we have come to a complete stop in the middle of nowhere. The silence that follows is absolute, broken only by the ticking of the cooling engine and the distant, lonely sound of a cricket somewhere in the tall grass outside. "Let's finish this," A second voice says, this one younger and more impatient, followed by the metallic click of a folding knife being snapped open. I can hear them moving more quickly now, no longer worried about the truck's movement throwing them off balance, and I realize I have seconds before they reach the rear stack. I look around wildly in the dim light, my eyes finally adjusting enough to see a small ventilation flap near the floor, a metal grate designed to let air circulate through the cargo. It is small, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through, but it is my only chance at survival. I begin to move, but I do it with the agonizing slowness of a clock hand, sliding my body inch by inch toward the grate while the men toss aside smaller boxes just a few feet away. Every time my clothing brushes against the floor, I stop and wait for a count of 10, my ears straining for any change in their breathing. I reach the grate and find that it is held in place by two simple sliding bolts, rusted and stubborn, requiring a force that will surely make a sound. I take off my heavy flannel shirt, wrapping it thick around the metal bolt to dampen the vibration, and I pull. The bolt slides back with a muffled thud, hidden by the sound of one of the men kicking a wooden pallet in frustration on the other side of the container. I repeat the process with the second bolt, my hands shaking so violently I almost lose my grip, until the flap is free. I can feel the cool night air rushing in through the opening, a sweet contrast to the stagnant heat of the hold, and I begin to slide my legs out into the darkness of the roadside. Just as my hips clear the opening, the flashlight beam hits the tires I was hiding behind, and I hear a shout of triumph that turns into a roar of anger. "He's going out the vent!" The gravel voice screams, and I hear the heavy thud of boots sprinting toward me. I don't worry about silence anymore. I scramble through the hole, the jagged metal edges tearing at my skin and clothes as I tumble out onto the sharp gravel of the shoulder. I hit the ground hard, rolling down a small embankment into the tall, dry grass of the ditch just as the back doors of the truck are thrown open with a violent crash. I lie perfectly still in the weeds, the tall stalks hiding my body as the men jump down from the trailer, their flashlights cutting wide arcs through the night. They are swearing, pacing the edge of the road, their shadows stretching out like giants against the trees. I press my face into the dirt, smelling the damp earth and the wild grass, keeping my mouth shut and my limbs tucked in, becoming a part of the landscape. They stay for what feels like hours, scanning the ditch and arguing about which way I ran, but eventually, the driver honks the horn, shouting that they are behind schedule. I watch the red taillights of the semi-truck disappear into the distance, the hum of the engine fading until the night is truly silent once again. I stay in the ditch for a long time, my body shivering from the adrenaline crash, staring up at the stars and realizing that I survived simply because I learned how to disappear into the quiet. I stand up slowly, my joints aching and my skin stung by the cold, and I begin the long walk back toward civilization, making sure my footsteps are as soft as a whisper on the pavement. The heavy oak doors of the Metropolitan Library slammed shut at midnight, locking me inside a tomb of 3 million books and a killer who knows exactly which floor I am hiding on. I am the night manager, and I am currently pressed against the cold marble floor of the history wing, my lungs burning because I am too terrified to let out a full breath. Somewhere near the biography section, I hear the slow, rhythmic, metallic click of a semi-automatic handgun being cocked. This isn't a ghost story, and there are no monsters under the floorboards. There is only a man I fired yesterday who told me he would make sure I never drew another paycheck. The silence in a library this large is heavy, almost physical, amplifying every tiny vibration into a deafening roar. My predator is wearing thick-soled work boots that thud against the carpeted aisles, a sound that tells me he is moving with a confidence I don't possess. I need to reach the security office on the 4th floor to trigger the silent alarm, but to get there, I have to navigate 400 feet of open mezzanine and a spiraling metal staircase that groans if you even look at it. I begin to crawl, my movements agonizingly slow, sliding my palms across the floor to ensure I don't kick a stray book or a fallen pen. I reach the end of the first row of shelves and peek around the corner, my heart hammering so violently against the floor that I'm certain the vibration will travel through the wood. A flashlight beam suddenly cuts through the darkness, a sharp, cold blade of light that sweeps across the spines of the books just inches above my head. I press my face into the dusty carpet, smelling the old paper and the chemical scent of floor wax, praying that the shadow of the mahogany desk hides my trembling frame. The light lingers on a copy of The Rise and Fall of Empires, and I realize the irony of my situation. I am trapped in a monument to human knowledge, yet I am being hunted like an animal. I know your routine, Marcus. The voice echoes through the vaulted ceiling, sounding like a ghost but carrying the weight of a very real threat. I know you check the locks at 12:15, and I know you hide in the staff lounge when you get bored. His footsteps stop, and the silence that follows is even more terrifying than his voice. Is he listening for the rustle of my clothes? Is he waiting for me to make a mistake and shift my weight? I keep my eyes locked on his boots, which are visible through the gap at the bottom of the bookshelves, just 10 feet away. He begins to whistle a low, distorted tune that grates on my nerves, a psychological tactic meant to make me crack and run. I can't run. The marble floors in the main lobby act like a megaphone, and the moment my rubber-soled shoes hit that stone, he will have a clear line of sight. I have to stay in the shadows of the stacks, moving through the narrow aisles where the light is weakest. I find a rolling book cart and slowly, inch by inch, I push it forward to create a momentary shield as I transition to the next row. The metal wheels of the cart give a tiny, high-pitched squeak, a sound no louder than a mouse, but in this dead silence, it sounds like a scream. I freeze instantly, my hand gripping the cold metal handle so hard my knuckles turn white. The whistling stops. The flashlight beam snaps toward my position, the circle of light dancing frantically across the shelves as he tries to pinpoint the source of the noise. I sink into the gap between two oversized encyclopedias, pulling my knees to my chest and tucking my chin down. "Found you," he whispers, though I can tell by the direction of his voice that he's guessing, not seeing. He fires a single shot into the air, and the explosion is deafening in the enclosed space, the smell of gunpowder instantly filling the wing. The bullet hits a plaster bust of Shakespeare, sending shards of white stone raining down onto the carpet like hailstones. I don't move. I don't even blink, even as a small piece of plaster lands on my hand and cuts the skin. I know that if I gasp or cry out from the sting, the next bullet won't be aimed at a statue. He begins to walk toward my row, his footsteps heavy and deliberate, each one sounding like a countdown to my end. I realize I can't stay here. He is going to walk right past this gap and see me curled up like a child. I look up and see the rolling ladder attached to the shelf, a tall wooden structure that slides on a brass rail. If I can climb it without making a sound, I can reach the top of the stacks, which are nearly 12 feet high. It is a massive risk, as the ladder is old and the brass rail is prone to clicking. I reach out and grab the first rung, testing the weight with my fingertips, waiting for the exact moment he kicks over a trash can in frustration to mask the sound of my first step. Clack. He hits the bin, and I pull myself up. Thump. He throws a book across the room, and I reach the third rung. My muscles are screaming from the tension, and the sweat is stinging my eyes, but I am now 10 feet off the ground, hidden in the deep shadows near the ceiling. He walks directly beneath me, the top of his head visible as he scans the floor where I was lying just seconds ago. He is breathing heavily now, his frustration growing as he realizes I am not where he thought. "Come out, Marcus. Make this easy on yourself," he snarls, his voice cracking with rage. He stands there for a full minute right under my feet, and I have to squeeze the wooden rungs so hard my hands go numb to prevent myself from trembling and shaking the ladder. As he moves toward the east wing, I see my opportunity. The security office is just across the mezzanine, and the door is reinforced steel. I wait until his flashlight beam is pointed away. Then I slide down the ladder with the grace of a shadow, my feet hitting the carpet with a dull, soft thud. I sprint, not with full strides, but with short, controlled bursts, keeping my body low to the ground like a sprinter. I reach the marble threshold of the lobby and I don't stop. I dive across the polished stone, sliding on my stomach toward the heavy door of the office. The sound of my body sliding on the marble alerts him instantly. "There!" he screams, and I hear the thunder of his boots hitting the stone behind me. I scramble to my feet, my fingers fumbling with the keypad of the security door, my heart roaring in my ears so loud I can't even hear my own panicked breathing. I punch in the code for -9-2-1, and the electronic lock clicks open just as a bullet ricochets off the metal frame, sending a spark of fire past my ear. I throw myself inside and slam the door, throwing the deadbolt and collapsing against the cold steel as the sound of him throwing his weight against the outside begins. I am safe. The walls are soundproofed, the glass is bullet-resistant, and the silent alarm is already flashing on the console, summoning the police who are only 3 blocks away. I sit in the dark office, watching him on the black and white monitors as he screams silently at the camera. His power gone, while I finally allow myself to take a long, shaky breath in the absolute silence of the room. The cold, black water is already pressing against my chest, and the only thing more terrifying than the thought of drowning in my own home is the sound of the intruder's boots splashing slowly through the kitchen directly above my head. I am pinned inside the narrow crawl space beneath the floorboards, a space barely 2 feet high that is rapidly filling with runoff from the worst storm our town has seen in a decade. There is a man up there, a man who escaped from the transport van when it hydroplaned off the highway 2 miles away, and I know he is looking for a place to hide where there are no witnesses left to talk. Every time the thunder rolls outside, I use the noise to shift my weight, but the water is rising so fast that I have to tilt my head back just to keep my nose and mouth in the shrinking pocket of air. The wooden joists above me groan as he walks, a slow and heavy tread that tells me he isn't in a rush because he thinks he's alone in the house. I can see the flickering light of his stolen flashlight through the tiny cracks in the floorboards, a thin line of yellow that cuts through the darkness of my watery tomb. I have to keep my breathing absolutely silent, but the water is ice cold, sending violent shivers through my limbs that threaten to splash against the foundation walls. If I gasp from the cold, if I let out even a tiny whimper, he will hear it through the wood, and I have nowhere left to run. The intruder stops moving, and for a long, agonizing minute, the only sound is the rain drumming against the siding and the rhythmic drip of a leak somewhere behind me. I am holding onto a copper pipe to keep myself from floating upward and bumping against the floorboards. My fingers so numb I can barely feel the metal. I can hear him breathing now, a ragged, wet sound that suggests he is tired, or perhaps injured from the crash. He is standing right over the trapdoor to the crawl space, the small wooden panel hidden under the rug in the pantry. "I know you're in here somewhere, friend," he says, his voice a low, terrifying rumble that vibrates through the very beams I am hiding under. I squeeze my eyes shut, my heart racing so fast it feels like a trapped bird fluttering in my chest, and I pray to a God I haven't spoken to in years that the rug is heavy enough to hide the seams of the door. The water reaches my earlobes, and I have to tilt my chin up toward the subflooring, my nose inches away from a jagged, rusted nail. I am terrified that a spider or a water beetle will crawl across my face, forcing a reaction out of me that will end my life. Suddenly, I hear the sound of the pantry door creaking open, the hinges screaming in the silence of the house. My blood turns to liquid ice as I realize he is looking for food or a place to sit, and he is now standing directly on top of the trapdoor. The wood flexes under his weight, pressing down toward the rising water, and I have to let out a tiny bit of air from my lungs to sink lower, my face submerged up to my nostrils. I am staring at the bottom of the floorboards, watching a single drop of condensation grow larger and larger until it falls and hits the surface of the water with a tiny, microscopic plink. He begins to hum a tuneless, repetitive melody that makes the hair on my arms stand up, a sound of someone who has completely lost their grip on reality. I hear him dragging a chair across the floor, the legs screeching against the linoleum with a sound that sets my teeth on edge. He sits down, his heavy boots right above my head, and I realize he intends to wait out the storm right here. The water is now level with my lips, and I have to take the shallowest, most careful breaths of my life, my chest barely moving as I fight the primal urge to hyperventilate. A massive crack of thunder shakes the entire foundation, and for a split second, the house lights flicker on and then die completely, plunging the kitchen above into total darkness. In the chaos of the sound, I try to adjust my grip on the pipe, but my hand slips, and my elbow hits the foundation wall with a dull thud. I freeze, my heart stopping in my chest, as the humming above me cuts off instantly. The silence that follows is so thick I can almost taste it, broken only by the sound of the rain and the heavy, intentional breathing of the man in the chair. He stands up, the chair creaking as the weight is removed, and I hear him lean down, his face likely inches from the floorboards. "That wasn't the thunder," he whispers, his voice sounding like sandpaper on stone. I can see the beam of his flashlight again, searching the floor, the light bleeding through the cracks and illuminating the murky, debris-filled water around my face. I submerge my mouth entirely, breathing only through my nose, my eyes wide and stinging from the dust and the dark. I see his hand reach down and pull back the rug, the fabric scraping against the wood with a sound like a heavy shroud being dragged. He finds the ring of the trapdoor, and I hear the metallic clack as he lifts the handle. This is it, I think, my mind racing through my final moments, wondering if I should try to pull him into the water or if I should just accept the end. But as he begins to pull the door upward, the pressure of the floodwater outside finally reaches a breaking point. A massive surge of water from the overflowing drainage ditch outside slams into the side of the house, forced through the small vents in the crawlspace by the sheer weight of the storm. The sudden rush of water creates a loud, gurgling roar that fills the space, and the pressure pushes me upward, my back hitting the floorboards with a violent force. The man above screams in surprise as a fountain of muddy water erupts through the opening trapdoor, splashing into his face and blinding him momentarily. He stumbles backward, slipping on the wet linoleum, and I hear him fall hard against the kitchen counter, the sound of breaking glass echoing through the room. I don't wait for him to recover. I use the momentum of the rising water to push the trapdoor fully open, dragging my heavy, soaked body out of the hole like a creature crawling out of the dark. I am coughing, gasping for air, but the sound is drowned out by the sound of the wind howling through the broken pantry window. I see him on the floor, clutching his head, his flashlight rolling across the tiles and pointing toward the back door. I scramble to my feet, my muscles screaming from the cold, and I bolt for the mudroom, my bare feet slapping against the wet floor. I reach the door, throw the bolt, and sprint out into the freezing rain, the darkness of the woods swallowing me whole as I run toward the lights of my neighbor's house half a mile away. I don't look back until I reach the porch, my lungs heaving, my body shaking so hard I can barely stand. I look back toward my house, a lonely silhouette in the storm, and I realize that the very water that almost drowned me was the only thing that gave me the noise I needed to escape. I am alive, and for the first time in hours, I don't have to be silent anymore.